Hello, everyone joining from LinkedIn and perhaps some folks joining from YouTube as well as Facebook. Welcome to the Public Speaking Coach AMA. Now, as you're joining here today, I welcome you and I want to make sure that you're able to share your questions in the comments so that they can be featured here live. So welcome everyone. Be sure to share your name, where you're joining from, and your industry as well. This is an excellent opportunity for you all to network with each other, as public speaking is at least one of your interests that you share. If you also want to throw a hobby in there, feel free to, but let's stick to making sure you at least have your name, where you're joining from, and your industry. So for myself, hi, Sammie Walker Herrera here. I'm actually streaming out of Houston, Texas right now, though I'm based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I'm here to answer your questions. I have a few pre-submitted questions already from folks who are interested in hearing from me talk about public speaking, but who weren't able to attend live. And I want to make sure I can highlight those questions, but really prioritize the folks who are currently here live. So if you are live, let me know in the comments. I would love to say hello. Make sure our audio and video is all working here as well. And alrighty, so good to see the technology's working. I did make sure to do a little bit of a rehearsal on that. And if any of y'all have questions about things like tech rehearsals before speaking, let me know, because I've made many a speaking mistake and I'd be happy to share what I've learned as well. So we see Stephanie is here from Texas and you work in tech. Hey, Stephanie, glad we're in the same state here. Let's see. I believe Danae, please let me know if I got that wrong, but we see here advocate for respect for Black women in the workplace, Carnegie Mellon alumna. I am also a Carnegie Mellon alumna, so glad that you're here today. All right, and if you're just joining this session, we're gonna get started in about a minute or so, but I wanna know who's here so I can make sure I answer your questions. So share your name, where you're joining from, and your industry. Oh, Danny, perfect. Thank you for the correction here. I know I need to, especially when I'm about to go on stage, whether it is the stand-up stage or a stage at an organization, I give pointers on how to pronounce Herrera quite often. At this point, I feel like I should probably have that phonetic name, and I'm really grateful that LinkedIn has that audio on your profile to allow you to highlight your name. Now, a couple of things. I'm not usually this orange. The lighting is giving that off quite a bit. I did vacation in New Mexico, but I promised y'all I did not get this tan. And we have a little bit of pixelation here, which makes me feel like Neo from the Matrix. Welcome everyone who's joining live. Again, I believe most folks are coming from LinkedIn today, so I would love to be sure that I'm answering your questions. So to get you started, or started thinking about some questions you can ask, let me start with one of our pre-submitted questions. And that is, how do you re-engage your audience when you notice they're distracted? And this is coming from Scott, who works at Google. So Scott was asking questions like the thought of, okay, well, what if I notice people are pulling out their phones, or they're checking their email, they're nodding off? How do I re-engage the audience when you notice that they're being distracted? So I wrote down a couple of notes, and I hope this helps anyone who is here watching this session. All right. I also see that Lily is joining as well from Austin. We got all our Texas folks here today. So when you're thinking about re-engaging your audience, first off, I want to check in with the folks in the crowd. Have you ever had a speech, whether it was a conference or even a work meeting, where you noticed that folks weren't engaged? Let me know if that's something that you've experienced as well. One thing I recognize that can be a big barrier to engagement is the environment folks are in. If it's very casual, or someone is the final or second to final speech, folks may be a bit tired. It could be after lunch, for example. And so that might be difficult to manage some of the engagement there. The first thing that I advise clients that I work with who are really focused, especially on Zoom, when we're doing virtual talks, who are really focused on, well, I'm looking at the camera, but I'm looking at everyone else's camera and not everyone looks super engaged, is to really make sure that you're focusing on yourself first. Are you communicating the message that you're focused on? Are you staying on track? Are you letting the idea of some folks maybe not being as engaged impact your ability to convey that message? Sometimes Zoom can be a little bit easier because you can turn off not only your self view, but you can turn off the view of other cameras and focus just much more on your speech, whether that is more, again, casual and formal, or even a sense of a performance. So the first piece of advice I'd give for folks is to really make sure that when you're speaking, that you feel good about it, that your confidence is coming from the inside rather than the reactions from folks, because it's very difficult to switch your mode just based on what other people are focusing on. I see Stephanie says, whether it's a virtual company or being on camera is usually the norm, but during events, people are off camera, so you can't gauge that engagement. Well, what I'll say, Stephanie, is sometimes it is super helpful when people turn off their camera because you can focus a lot less on how that other person is understanding your message. There may be someone who maybe is washing dishes at the same time as you're speaking, but they might be paying more attention than the person who even has their camera on. We can't read people's minds. We don't know the way that that person is engaged, and that's okay. So what I recommend for folks regarding audience engagement is to make sure to build in audience engagement within your speech. The thing is, if you have let's say you have an hour-long talk and it's 35 minutes until the first time you ask someone to raise their hand, you've really lost the audience because they're expecting to continue listening to a lecture. You haven't set the expectation that someone is going to be asking for that engagement. So what you want to do is you really want to start off the speech, whether it's the first 30 seconds or within the first couple of minutes, that the engagement is expected. And whether it's Zoom or whether it's in person, you can do polls. You can ask a quick, simple question. You can have people raise their hands, do some type of activity, even start with a mini Q&A. What you want to do is start the engagement early, and you want to do the engagement often as well to build that momentum and the engagement as well. So Scott and anyone else who's here, I hope this was helpful. The thing is, we can't take other people's lack of engagement personally. For example, if someone's on their phone, we don't know whether that might be an emergency or they're looking forward to a specific message. So as long as we depersonalize what that lack of engagement possibly looks like, we focus on our internal confidence, and we build more opportunities for engagement, I think those 3 steps will help everyone. All right. Well, I want to check in here for whoever's here. What other questions do you have? You can also let me know in the chat, why are you here? What is the goal of attending this Ask Me Anything? And if you do have a question, we'll start with that one, but we can also go to one of the other pre-submitted questions. You can see here I'm getting no visual audience engagement. That's a tricky thing when we have these types of lives here, but I appreciate everyone who's sharing comments, who's liking, and who is highlighting what their interests are in this session. So far, we have Stephanie, we have Danny, we have Lily. So if anyone else who has joined in the last few minutes of this session, feel free to share your name, where you're joining from, and what industry you're in, because who knows, your next coworker, your next business partner, your next client could be someone who's here in this session. All right, we're going to move to another pre-submitted question. This one is from Mabi, who is a career counselor. And what she wants to know is what the importance of body language is. If this is something that you've been curious about as well, let me know in the chat. Include the word visuals in the chat if that's something that you've wondered about in your own speaking. Now, when I'm working with clients and I'm doing audits, I'm evaluating their speaking for the first time, I use a model that's called the 3 V's. That stands for verbal, vocal, and visual. Verbal is what you say. It's your content. It's whether you've answered the question. In some ways, it's your vocabulary as well. The vocal is how you say it. It's your tonality. It is your volume, your pacing, your pauses. It's the way that folks really absorb what you're saying and often get a big part of your emotionality. Now, the last V is visual. So that's what people can see. Now, we cut off the visual completely when we do audio events, where we listen to audio podcasts, which is fine. That's a great way to impart messages. And for example, I love audiobooks, so it's a great way that I love to learn, especially at 1.4 speed. However, you notice that when we cut visual, we are cutting a large amount of the communication from a person. And so with 3 Vs, you'd think 33%, 33%, 33%. The thing about nonverbal communication is, even though it's not 100% of the communication, it's a large percentage. It's about 60 to 70%, depending on some studies that you're looking at, of how people are understanding what you're communicating. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you're watching a YouTube video and you decide, you know what, I'm going to mute whomever the speaker is, you can get a sense of that person's energy. You can get a sense of that person's authenticity, even based on the specific gestures you're using. You can get a sense of what they're talking about. So for example, if I go like this, people may assume that I'm running. If I go like this, looks like I'm holding a backpack. If I go like this, I'm cooking, baking, or mixing something. So oftentimes these really descriptive gestures, which not everyone does, often a bit more advanced speakers tend to do those, can really help elevate and add more of that sensory component to speaking. And so with that, what I'll say is, when you're combining the verbal, the vocal, and the visual, what's the most important is the congruency. If you say that you're happy, you want to sound happy, that's the vocal, and you want to look happy, which is the verbal. With emotions, and again, a lot of those sensory components, you want to make sure that there's that alignment or congruency, so folks can really believe what you're saying. And not only can they believe what you're saying, they can also feel what you're saying as well. So that is the big importance of body language. Now, what I'll say is, if you are apprehensive to start speaking and you want to start with audio, start with audio. You don't have to do audio visual from the start. The thing about speaking is, you just got to get started. You can read every book. You can listen to every YouTube video. You can come to every single one of my live sessions. However, what you may notice is that you might not be improving in your public speaking. You might improve in some knowledge. Maybe you can give folks a lot more detailed feedback, but you might not be improving your personal public speaking just from that. What you have to do is, you have to take the risk of being vulnerable and failing by speaking up, by practicing. So whether that's recording mini podcasts on your own phone just for practice, using LinkedIn audio, or jumping into LinkedIn Live, you want to think about, what are the opportunities for me to continue practicing my speaking? Can you ask for the opportunity to speak up at work? Can you ask to give the presentation in that either is weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, and have those opportunities to build your exposure and build your experience? Now, still checking in, I want to see do we happen to have more questions? Okay, let's see. What questions do we have? So we've talked about re-engaging your audience. We've talked about body language. I want to see, are there any questions that come from these, or things that you'd want to ask a public speaking coach who's here live? We still have another 15 minutes or so I can make sure to answer your questions here. Okay, Stephanie, thank you so much for highlighting a question here. So I still find that I get nervous speaking at events within my organization, even though I've been doing it for 2 years now. First off, Stephanie, congratulations to you. I'm really glad that you've been stepping up and building more of that experience speaking. Will that feeling ever go away? Or is it just something that you learn to get used to because it becomes less bothersome over time? I love this question, Stephanie. This is something that I feel like I repeat often to my clients, but I don't get to share all the time in the public eye of LinkedIn Live. So I'm glad that I can answer this here. One thing I'll highlight to you, Stephanie, is I've been speaking for a number of years as well at universities that I've worked at, such as the University of Florida and Carnegie Mellon, in my own business, Speak Y'all. And what I find is even today, right before this, putting on lipstick, fixing my hair, I was a bit nervous. I have done many LinkedIn Lives before, but it's been a little bit of time. And what I'll say about being nervous is that when you are nervous, there's a sweet spot of nervousness. It's kind of like Goldilocks, right? The bed is too soft, the bed is too hard, the bed is just right. If you are way too nervous, you may never even get on the stage. And the thing is, what I'm seeing is that you've been speaking for the last couple of years. And that's something that's courageous, and I'm really proud of you for. What the other side is that we think we want to get to is, I don't feel nervous, this is just a breeze. But what I find with those folks is sometimes some of the speakers who say, this is a breeze, I'm just going to wing it, don't put in the effort to do the best job that they can. Maybe they don't take the extra time to provide more value. Maybe they make assumptions of what their audience is looking for instead of asking questions. So what we want to do is have that sweet spot in the middle where we do feel a little nervous. And the reason we feel nervous is because we care. Because we care about how well we do. We care about the value that we're sharing with other people. We care about how we're representing our organizations, whether that's the organization you work for, or maybe an organization you volunteer for, or an organization or company that you found. So what I'll say is the feeling never goes away. However, it can be reduced and it can be managed. I didn't feel like I was frantic running around the room like I did maybe 4 years ago when I first started posting on LinkedIn, started doing videos, things like that. So what you want to do is just make sure that you have a bit of a practice to help manage your nerves and also build this routine, or actually not a routine, more of a ritual, if you will. Is there any drink that you drink before you start speaking, like a special tea? Do you listen to any specific songs? Do you have like a hype up playlist, or maybe a chill down playlist might be better for you? What I'll say is if you build a ritual around preparing for speaking, you'll feel a lot more professional. You'll feel a lot more ready. You'll still feel those nerves, but you'll feel like you've done everything you can to do the best job you can. So I see you replied here, Stephanie. I love that. It definitely resonates because I'm always wanting to make sure the information I share is valuable to the people who attend. So Stephanie, I think to summarize this in one sentence for you, being nervous means you care. And so it's okay to be a bit nervous as long as you're taking care of yourself as well. So I'd love to hear after this live here, Stephanie, or even we have a little bit of time, if you have your own ritual for preparing before you speak, whether it is in a meeting, like raising your hand in a meeting or leading a meeting, or any other work-related speaking, I'd love to hear what that ritual is. And if you don't have one, I'd love to hear how you build it. Fantastic question. Whew, I love this so much. Alrighty, everyone. Let's see. Any more questions as we go along here? And again, if we have any new people who've joined in the last few minutes, don't be scared. Feel free to let us know who you are in the chat, your name, where you're joining from, as well as your industry. We want to make sure that we're building more and more connections here on good old LinkedIn. And if we have a bit of a pause for a question, what I can do is I can pull one more pre-asked question. Alrighty, so the third pre-submitted question here is, why did you become a public speaking coach, Sammie? Maybe it's not asked in that tone all the time, but what I'll say is I've been on a number of podcasts, and that is usually either the first or second question that I get. What I find is that my answer evolves. And so for today, how I'm thinking about this answer is I became a public speaking coach because over the last few years, I recognized the importance of really building healthy communication within my relationships as well as within the workplace. There were times when I was very passive, and there were times when I was overly direct. And there were even times when I decided, you know what? I love making people laugh, and I'm going to focus so much on making people laugh that I forgot to impart a message. For example, when I was in college, I was our vice president of philanthropy. And when I had the opportunity to be up in front of our chapter of 60 women, I loved it. I've always loved bit more of that spotlight. I'm definitely an extrovert, and I'm very welcome to the spotlight. But I realized I focused so much on the sense of hyper engagement, getting people excited, that I wasn't really structuring what I was saying. A couple of years ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and by going through public speaking training, it taught me how to slow down my brain, to really think through what I'm saying, and to think while I'm speaking, so that I could have not only an effective message, but I could also have a concise message as well. I admittedly am a recovering rambler. If you are also a recovering rambler, I'd love to hear it as well. But so what I found is public speaking coaching and training has really helped me build a lot more in-depth relationships with people, because I'm able to say what I mean in a way that works with the way my brain works, to really slow down my fast-paced brain to make sure that I'm meeting people where they are. And so that motivates me every single day to continue what I'm doing here, which is training and coaching as well. So again, if you are a recovering rambler or a current rambler, that's okay. This is a safe space. Okay, everyone, we have another about 10 minutes or so before we close the AMA. Want to check in and see if we happen to have any more questions. These can be follow-ups, these can be clarifications. As long as it tends to be a little bit related to public speaking, I'm here to answer your question. Okay, Stephanie, thank you for another question. And I love this one, by the way. Let's see. Can you share an obstacle that you've had to overcome as a Latina public speaker and how you overcame it? Fantastic question. Let me give it some thought for you. And as we're going here, anyone else want to drop any questions? We'll make sure we have it in the queue. Or that's how British people say it, in the line. Okay. I'll say one challenge I've faced, not only as a Latina speaker, but as someone who is a younger person. I am a late millennial, not Gen Z, just for clarification. No hate on Gen Z, just the year I was born. One thing I've found is the experience of perceiving being underestimated, as well as learning that I've been underestimated. There was a time that I was working with a partner. We were both training public speaking together. And there was only once out of 50 or 60 clients that we worked with where they specifically wanted to work with the other trainer, who is a man, who looks a lot older than me, even though he's only about 8 months older than me. And that was a shock to me, because it was the first time that I realized that some people do have biases about like youth in regards to the sense of coaching, and even possibly gender. I'm not completely sure. The thing is, what I really learned about myself is that I was holding this perception that I might be underestimated for being young, for being a woman, for being Latina. And it only really surfaced, I guess it was more unconscious, if you will, when it actually happened in real practice. So I've had to take some time to really think about what are the benefits and what are the good things I've heard from other people. The thing about the human brain is we focus so much on the negative that we can have 50 positive experiences, but one of them knocks us all the way down. And that's where concepts such as imposter syndrome or lack of confidence really grow. They really catch like wildfire. So what I find has been helpful for me has been relying on my evidence, relying on the accounts and the relationships I've built with clients who felt like they've gained so much from value from what I've said, not only from what I've said and taught, but even from my identity. So I worked with one client who, I believe her daughter was about my age. And what she told me was, I love working with young people. Thank you so much. Like, I love all the experience that you've built in such a short time. That is the complete opposite of the other experience. And so what I try to do is really center all those positive experiences, whether they're physical evidence like testimonials on my website or on LinkedIn, or something that I write down as like a happy for that day. I really try to focus on, hey, I might have this perception, I might have this feeling that I'm being underestimated for my identity in some way. For example, I'm from Texas and sometimes my accent comes out as well. I have an accent for the word accent. And I worry at times, am I going to be underestimated for that? But I focus more on my message and authenticity. Thank you so much for that question, Stephanie. Lily, let's see. What are your top tips on structuring your message and your delivery so that it's effective and specific and concise? Okay, so let's focus on the word message here, because that is the most important thing when it comes to your speaking. Because you can talk and talk and talk, and when people leave, they might not know what the point of it was. And what you want to do is make sure it's very crystal clear that you can walk up to someone who attended your speech, go up to them and say, hey, if you had to summarize what the main message was, and they can do it in an instant, and they can do it in under 10 words. So let's talk about that. What you want to do is you want to start with your message. Do not start with a story. Do not start with a joke. Do not start with a hook. Start with your message. Craig Valentine, who is the 1999 World Public Speaking Champion, calls this a foundational phrase, where this is the message of your speech and it needs to be 10 words or less. If you have an entire paragraph and that's your message, it's not concise, it's not specific, and it's definitely not going to be effective. So what you want to do is you really want to think, what is the message of my speech? Let's say the message is, you can do whatever you put your heart to. You can do whatever you put your heart to. 9 words. Close enough. We can try to break it down to 6 or 3 words if we wanted to, but let's stick to 9 words. So you can put your heart to whatever you're doing here. So what you want to do is you want to start with that message. If you're starting to write your speech, first off, if you're writing a draft, don't edit and write. Just write. Have a period for writing, have a separate period for editing. Now, when you get to the editing period, what you want to do is you want to analyze every sentence you've written and see, does it contribute to that message about putting your heart into whatever? See, I've even lost it. It was a little too long. 9 words, probably a little bit too long. What are some of the most famous trademarks? So, for example, just do it. 3 words. Si se puede. 3 words. So if the message is si se puede, which is a lot easier to remember, how do you know that every single sentence is aligning with that message? How do you embed that message in your speech multiple times so it's easy for people to pull that out? You want to make sure that you're not creating a literature review for someone or a literary analysis where they have to think about it for multiple hours and go back to your speech and take cliff notes, things like that. You want to make it very clear by structuring your speech based on that message. Now, I hope that was helpful for you, Lily. Okay, everyone. Well, we are coming to the close of this AMA. I hope this is valuable to anyone who is here live, and I really greatly hope it's helpful for anyone who watches this as a recording on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. Now, for anyone who's here, again, live or recording, what I want to share with you is the Confidence Confidential newsletter, which you can join at subscribe.speakyall.com so that you can be the first to learn more about live events like this. I'm planning on hosting another event focused on body language. And if that's something that you're interested in, let me know in the chat. Be sure to join subscribe.speakyall.com so I can make sure I can send you weekly reminders of different events like this, as well as public speaking strategies. But I really want to thank everyone here who submitted questions before this AMA, who's been here, even asking clarifying questions. Lily, Stephanie, Danny, thank you so much for your time. I hope as you continue building your own speaking experience and your confidence, that we can connect further so that you can feel as confident as possible, whether you're speaking at work, whether you're speaking to 2 people, 200, 2,000 people as well. So I see Lily and Stephanie are interested in the event. Make sure you join the newsletter, and I'll also be sure to share this with you here on LinkedIn. So everyone, thank you so much for sharing your time with me today. I do not take that for granted, so I want to make sure we end right on time here. Thank you, everyone. My name is Sammie Walker Herrera of Speak Y'all, and let's speak, y'all.